Good morning, everyone. As many of you may know, I am Brittany Montiliano, Program Manager for the Make Center for Business and Leadership. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Today we are having our webinar on reducing the risk of cyber threats for your remote business. And we are happy to have Stan Lau from Hawaii Tech Support to be helping us with facilitating today's presentation. For those that who had missed it earlier, we'll be having a short Q&A at the end of today's presentation. Now, before we proceed, I would like to welcome MCBL's Program Director, Colleen McAlooney, to say a few words. Colleen.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Brittany. Aloha and welcome to today's MCBL webinar on reducing the risks of cyber threats for your business. As the only women's business center in Hawaii, MCBL is proud to support and assist entrepreneurs in starting and growing small businesses. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us for free small business counseling and support as you navigate these unprecedented times. And I'd really like to give a big shout out to Stanley and Belinda for helping support us in this, getting all this very important cybersecurity information out to our clients and small businesses. So thanks very much to Stan and Belinda. Okay, back to Brittany.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Now I would like to introduce you to our team. As I had mentioned in my earlier, I am Brittany Montiliano, Program Manager for the Center. We also have Maylen Zambrano, our Program Coordinator. Maylen will be assisting with any technical issues during today's presentation. In case you get logged off or you need any assistance, please email Maylen at mwcaoahu.org. Maylen will also be entering in her email into the chat area in case you have any issues. Now I would like to introduce our facilitator again for today, Stan Lau.
Hi, thank you very much for attending this morning's session and on cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is such a big topic, and not just because everyone's working remote these days, but really with the data that's out in the cloud, with communications, with private information being accessible, this is a very, very important topic. And what we'll do today is cover some of the different technologies, some of the different things to consider as a business owner to protect your information, to protect your brand, and to really protect your organization from threats that you may or may not be aware of. And so what we'll cover today is cybersecurity for your business. And so for our agenda today, what I'd like to do is go over some of the common trends that you could see, but ultimately what we're doing today is really, my goal is to leave you more informed with actionable items, things that you can do right away with relatively low cost and that have huge impact. So we'll talk about some of the top threats, what you need to be aware of, and some of the action items again that you can take right away. And we'll follow at the end. Like Brittany had mentioned, we'll have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, feel free to message that in, and we'll hold all questions, and then we'll go through that all together at the end. And so I thought starting, kind of just with a little comic that we've come across, and this is, it's in a way, it's very funny, right? It's encryption. You must be joking. It took me 6 months just to learn how to email. And so with one of the things with cybersecurity and just security in general is, as we make things more secure, the complexity and users getting used to it becomes, there are those roadblocks. And so part of what we're trying to do for our businesses that we support is to introduce these levels of security, the software tools, the operating procedures, to implement them to secure the organization. But at the same time, the tools and the systems still have to be usable. And so we don't want you to be in this position where you're like, oh, encryption, what do we have to do and how do we use this? It just makes my day, and it takes twice as long to do things. That's not what we're trying to do. So what are some of the things that we need to be aware of? There's so much buzz around cybersecurity. How does it affect your organization? So if we take a look at cybersecurity, it's nothing new. This is in terms of protecting your data, that responsibility hasn't changed at all. So even before we had all these notifications and hearing about Equifax and Home Depot and Target, everyone had the responsibility as business owners, as data owners, to protect it. And so if you are running a business, you may be running a retail business or an e-commerce business, all the information that you collect, whether it's personal information, payment card information, that is all your responsibility to protect. And that hasn't changed. But what has changed is we're hearing a lot more about it. Has it happened in the past? Yes, it has. It's increased. And why has it increased? A lot of it has to do with the technology changes. And so now that everything's connected all the time, that leaves doors open in a sense that everything's connected, systems are online 24/7. Whereas in the past, it wasn't quite like that. People weren't as connected before. And so that, makes, that's a big change in terms of why there's an increase in activity. Applications, as we move more applications to the cloud, they become more accessible. People are logging in from their phones to do their banking. Everyone has a website. A lot of you may have e-commerce type websites that you need to be concerned about. So moving these or introducing these technologies is a big change and an area to cover. And then, everyone's moving their data, their systems to the cloud. And so just a huge explosion of information that's stored electronically. So whether it's, moving all of your data files to systems like SharePoint or Dropbox, and your email communications, your fax communications, now no one faxes or fewer people are faxing through physical phones. Now there's electronic faxes that take place. So just, things that were traditionally not as electronic or stored online, they're also there, electronic health records, so all of that. And so why should you be concerned? I'm gonna just highlight the second one here, the PCI DSS. So for most of you that are running businesses that either do retail or online credit card transactions, you may be subject to this PCI DSS, which is, it's the payment card industry. That's what PCI stands for. And so you may be subject to a lot of the regulations. So do you have measures in place? How often are you checking your firewalls? How do you encrypt your data that you receive? So you have regulations in place that you are subject to. And so typically if you sign up for like a credit card processing system, depending on how you store your data, you will be subject to this. So that's important to know that you may be subject to some compliance requirements based on the type of business you're doing and how you're transacting. And so with that, there's fines and penalties. HIPAA is a big thing. If you're a healthcare provider or are doing business with a healthcare provider, there are restrictions and regulations to be compliant in that space. So protecting patient information, making sure that you have agreements assigned, having systems in place, segregating your data. Those are all big things to have in terms of compliance. And then, this is a big one, notification requirements, especially with HIPAA. A lot of these regulations, regulatory bodies are saying if something happens to your systems and you expose personal information, you have the obligation to notify them. Sometimes it's even taking out ads in newspapers or publishing that you had an incident, offering credit protection. So, there are requirements in place depending on what happened, what kind of breach it is. But I think lastly, this is something that we as business owners are all concerned about is, what happens to your business data. Really, it's our reputation, it's the security. And so if something happens and, there's news that your company exposed, like, Equifax, Home Depot, we all have seen these, it really takes from a branding perspective and a reliability and trustworthy perspective, it really hurts the brand. And that's a big thing too. And so what do breaches look like? So overall, I have some statistics up from Verizon data. Verizon's one of the largest aggregators of security information, and they put out a really comprehensive report each year. And so I want to focus on that bottom portion because a lot of times we think, I don't have much data that's worth anything to anyone. But if you take a look at the statistics, 58% of small businesses are the ones that get hit. And so it's not just large corporations or big banks or hospitals that are getting attacked. It's actually more than not. It's the small business. It's you and I. And so what are some of the top cyber threats to your organization. And so there's a graphic here. If you take a look at the two largest in terms of damage, it's really the business email compromise, and that's has anything to do with phishing, which we'll talk about, fraud, right, impersonation. So that business email compromise and the confidence fraud, those are related, where people are getting tricked into doing things, sending money, buying fake gift cards, or sending out lists or information. Those are the two biggest issues out there right now. And so let's take a look at what that means. So phishing and business email compromise. And so this is the most common attack vector, which means this is the most common way that people end up in some kind of cybersecurity issue, whether it's providing their email information inadvertently or launching something that came through an email. And so, often this is the entry point. We use email every day, and we get emails, from random people, from prospects. So we're not always aware of the email that we're receiving. A lot of you may have seen notices saying your password is expired, you need to take action. And so the email systems are the weakest link right now. And so what does that look like? So phishing, this is what happens with phishing. And so you normally get an email, you receive an email from someone or a service that you may or may not do business with. It might be from your bank, it might be from a service like PayPal or Dropbox. And then you click on the link and it asks you to log in. The site looks very legitimate. It looks like you're logging in. And once you enter that information or you act on that, then that's when your information, your username and password is now collected. And once that's collected, whoever has that can do, they can access your account. And so that's a big deal. And so I have a sample up here of what a phish email looks like, right? So if you look at it, it looks pretty legitimate, right? So it's from service@international.paypal.com, and it has, the PayPal. It's asking me to remove my limitation. And so, if you take a look, here are some kind of giveaways that you can look at. And so the actual email address, and we see this quite often, is it's from paypal.imay.com. Sometimes it says from PayPal, but it's from a random email address at gmail.com, or a domain that's not even related to the service. And that's a dead giveaway. And so if you ever have any questions about, who is this from? Is it legitimate? That's an easy way to tell just by looking at the address. But that's not the only way. There's a lot of ways to spoof that or kind of fake that or hide that. So something that you can also check is in this box, normally for where it says remove your limitation, anytime there's a hyperlink, your web browser, whether it's Chrome or Edge or Firefox, it shows you where that link goes to. And that's the important part, because it's telling you when you click on this, it's going to go to this address. And so how can you tell? So when it ends up going to a web address, here are some things that you can look at. And so most browsers have this feature where it checks some things. So you could take a look at here on the lower screen or the lower image. It has this green bar, right? And it tells you to the right, there's a lock, which means it has a verified certificate that is issued to PayPal. So between the top and the bottom, the top is not legitimate, the bottom one is, and it's just very little subtle things that you can look at that tell you the difference. And so again, something to look at is the green bar, which is a feature that a lot of the web browsers have. The lock, who it's issued to, that's the certificate verifying that it is that company. Even the web address, if there's ever any doubt, always type in the address instead of clicking a link. So if there's a question of, I'm not sure of where this email is going to take me, instead of typing or clicking the link, type in www.paypal.com or asbhawaii.com or whatever the address is. And so here's what I was talking about in terms of the link. On the face, it says facebook.com, but if I hover over each of these, I'm not sure if you can see it, but it tells you where this link goes to. So on this, it says it goes to classtools.net/fb/home-page. The second one goes to a different site, and then This third one, it goes to, remove malware virus.site. And so this is what I meant by verifying where the link goes to. So just because it looks like it says, facebook.com, when I click on any of these, it'll take me to 3 different websites. So that's something to be mindful of. The second piece that you can do or you can implement to protect your accounts is two-factor authentication. And two-factor authentication, it's basically, aside from your username and password, you have something else that verifies who you are. And a lot of times that something else is something that you physically have. So it might be your cell phone. So if you set up an account with two-factor authentication using text messages, so in the system, you would tell it, sign on and then text me after I'm successfully logged in. So you have your phone, it'll send you a code, and then you have to enter that code on the website. And so a lot of the major services, whether they're paid or free, like Gmail, Outlook, Microsoft 365 is a very common business platform. A lot of your banking websites will have some form of additional authentication. That is one of the best things you can do and activate right away. And we've seen, just even within this past week, we've seen, business owners not have this on and give away their credentials, and it causes a lot of problems with people accessing data, people logging into their accounts inadvertently. So if you could set that up, and the best way to do it is either if you are a regular user of that website, they normally have instructions, or you can contact their support to see how you could set it up. But it's normally you have a username and password, then you would set up an app or text or some kind of security code or question that ties to either your mobile phone or an application on the mobile phone. So that's, that if there's anything else that you take away from today is to use and set up two-factor authentication wherever you can. Okay, so in addition to that, some good password practices is, these are a lot of times they're very common sense, but there's often a lot of confusion about passwords and how complex do they need to be, and does it have to be totally random? So these are just some really good just common password practices. Avoid very simple common passwords. And the second one is probably, the answer to that question is you don't need to have something that's completely random that you have a hard time forgetting. A lot of times the longer the password is, the stronger it is. So the more, the length of a password, and it has to do with how people are reversing passwords, but the longer it is, the stronger it is, right? So that's kind of something to keep in mind. And so even doing something as simple as putting together a couple of random words with letters and numbers and symbols. So something like this, easy to remember @orange. It's not too hard to remember, but it's a long and complex password. In addition to that, using unique passwords for sites. And so this is normally what people do is they'll have a common password. So when I sign up for my bank account, I use a username and this password. And then when I sign up for my credit card online account, I'll use my email address and that same password. I'm not saying I do. I'm saying this is common in terms of what people do. So what happens is if you give away your account credentials and it's the same password, then it's not hard to start either looking at your communication and seeing, okay, this person also does banking with this organization. I have their current password. And if you're using the same password that you've given away, logging into those accounts will happen just like that. And so using unique passwords for each site and service minimizes that problem. And so, how do I keep track of this? I already have a hard enough time just keeping track of one password. What do I do? What can I do? So that last point on using a password manager, and there are free password managers out there that you can use. I listed a couple. LastPass has a free personal password manager. It's very easy to use. You can sign up for it and you make password entries and you can use it. So you maintain one password. You can secure it by using the two-factor authentication. There's a mobile app for it. There's a computer plugin for it. So having that and just using it to generate your passwords and keep track of it, that takes away the complexity of even remembering or creating your passwords with this. And so there's questions about whether or not password managers like this are secure. They're built around securing and protecting your data between how it's stored, how it's transmitted to you. There are protections in place. Are they 100% foolproof? I would know, because there have been issues with certain platforms in the past. But in terms of moving towards a secure password management system, that's the first thing we as users can do, is to look at what password protection options are available through a password manager. And LastPass, KeePass are some free options that you can start out with. And so some additional features with the password managers, form autofills. So instead of having to type in your usernames, there's plugins where you just click on it and it automatically logs in for you. A lot of times you don't even need to remember your password anymore, which is good, so that you're not having to remember it, but also that, sharing passwords is a big thing. If you have a team, there are options where a lot of times you may have people that need to log into one of your services, like your QuickBooks Online or something like that. With QuickBooks, you should be creating individual users, but there may be some other services that you only have one account for that you need to share with, a teammate or a colleague. And so there are ways to securely share those logins using some of these services. And again, turning on multi-factor authentication, that's a big thing. Okay, and the last thing that we talk about today is backups. So if anything were to happen, ransomware, or you lose, you deleted your files accidentally, or there's data corruption, backups are your last line of defense. And so whether they're files saved to your local PC, you want to make sure that you have some kind of backup in place, because the hard disk or the disk inside of your computer can go out at any time, without notice. There's events, we've seen ransomware cases in the past where someone introduces ransomware to their system or to their network, and then it starts encrypting data without good backups. There's payment options. There's, other than that, you have to go to backup, which is why backup's such a big thing. And, backup options are readily available out there. I listed some of the options for local PCs, Carbonite, iDrive. OneDrive is not really a backup utility, but it's a second layer of protection against hardware failure. So OneDrive is something that Microsoft, it's their file sharing platform. And so with that installed, you can set it up to back up your desktop and your documents. So it is an additional level of protection, even though it's not a true backup system. But anything you can do to protect your data in case something happens, having that available, that's really big. And so, just to recap, a couple of things to be aware of with phishing and two-factor authentication. Those are the two quick things you can do. They're no cost to implement them, but they're really, really effective to hedging off a lot of, the really, really big threats. We talked about the 96% entry point for business email compromise. Good password practices, use a password manager. If you can, like I said, there are free options out there. Start with that, get yourself familiar with it, comfortable with it, and then you can use it, share it with your team. Not your credentials, but have them also install the program so that they can use it. And there's, different ways to share passwords securely. And lastly, the backups, to make sure that you have, this is one of those things where every organization needs to make sure they have some kind of backup protection in place in case their primary data set is no longer available. And so we talked about, for the rest of the time, I'd like to see if we can go through some Q&A. It looks like there's some questions out there that we can go through. And so if you have any questions, go ahead and chat them in and we'll go through them. And so it looks like there's a couple of questions here. What about using a VPN? I heard that's a good idea to help protect your information online. Does that also help to protect my business customer information? Yes. Okay. So a VPN, it stands for Virtual Private Network. And what that does is, right now when you surf the web, that information, once it leaves your office, your home office, once it's sent out there, there's little protection in terms of the information that you're sending out. And so what the VPN does is it creates a secure connection to wherever you're tunneling to. So whatever you're connecting to. So a lot of these VPN services, they provide encryption. And so to answer your question, is it a good idea to protect your information online? It's a good idea. Yeah, if you can implement it, there's a couple of options. Very popular option is NordVPN. It's not very expensive. There's other VPN services that you can install. And the way it works is you install some software onto your computer, and wherever you are, I like to do this whenever I'm outside of the office. So when I'm at Starbucks or any place with a public Wi-Fi, I like to launch my VPN so that even within the environment, all the other people that are sitting there doing work, they can't see my activity in that environment. So yep, that's something that would definitely be helpful. Again, there's different services, but NordVPN, N-O-R-D VPN is a very common platform that can be used. Easy to install and easy to run and not very expensive. And does that also help to protect my business customer information? And so the VPN is just one piece of protecting your information that just secures the transmission of the data. So some other things that you want to look for is, what's happening with the data not when it's not being sent. And so some other things that I can recommend to protect your data is, encryption. The cartoon kind of talked about that, but a lot of your systems, whether it's a Mac computer or a PC, if it's Windows based, there are encryption methods to secure the data on your hard drive. So Windows comes with, the Pro version comes with a function called BitLocker. And so if you enable that, it encrypts or kind of scrambles the data on your hard drive, and it requires a key or some method to decrypt it to get into that information. And so where this comes in handy is if you lose your laptop and if there was private information on it, if it's encrypted, people cannot get into that information. If it's unencrypted, it's not hard to get that information with the device. If someone has an unencrypted device in their hands, it's not hard to get to that data. And so that's something that I could recommend to protect, is make sure that you're using encryption on your devices, not just when sending it, but also on the machine itself. Yeah, and so some other protection that we talked about backups. So some of the backups, backup options available, Carbonite or iDrive, they're all cloud-based. And so you don't need to buy any hardware. You would, again, it's software-based, so you install software on it, you set up an account, and you tell the software what you want backed up. If you want to back up only certain folders and files, you want to back up your entire computer, you just need an internet connection, and that backs up your systems. And so if you were to ever lose your laptop or your device, then you have pictures. And so where we've seen this happen, unfortunately, is without backups, you lose critical files. We've worked with people that have lost, all of their, photos and history of, all their family photos and all of that. So it really, having a backup in place, whether it's to a local hard drive or using a cloud service, is something that, at that point, if something happens, there's really you can't recover from that. And so there's another question here. What are your thoughts on autofill credit card settings stored in your web browser when purchasing something online? Okay, that's a good question. So autofill, whether it's from your web browser, whether it's from your password managers, it really depends on how the information is stored on the computer. And so it mentions here, or one-click payment via iPhone. And so when it's autofilling, all it's doing is it's, whether you type in the number, or you're having this program do the autofill for you, it's doing the same thing. So the security concern is not so much that typing in portion. It's okay, what's happening when I enter this information and it's saved. So for example, if I have a web browser and I save this information in there so that it could just populate it for me every time I do that, how secure is that? Who sees it? Where is it stored? How securely is it stored? And so for these types of functions, I normally use my password manager for something like that. So my password manager has the ability to, I enter my credit card information there and I have it saved. And so when I run this password manager, I have to log in, I have to do my 2FA, and then I can pick and choose when I want it to autofill. So it'll ask me when it sees something that looks like a place to enter payment information. It asks me, do I want to autofill it? And so if I want to, instead of taking out my credit card to enter the information, I'll click on it and it'll enter the information for me, whatever I've saved in the past. So that's a good option. So again, it depends, the security of it just depends on what system you're using and how it's stored. If you don't know, even for us, a lot of times we don't know specifically unless how secure a platform is, a program is, until you look into it. So, checking how they implement security, what kind of breaches or issues they've had in the past, how they address vulnerabilities or problems with their systems. Those are all important things to see how secure something is. So yeah, those are definitely kind of the 3 quick hit things that we can do. If there are any other questions, please feel free to chat them in or type them in. And even if it's not related to anything that we talked about, we could definitely add, talk about other areas. Yeah, so there's a question. It says, if I sync my browser to remember my credit card information or passwords to banking sites, is that stored in an easy to access file on my computer? If stolen, is it encrypted? Right. And so that's a good question. So, the person that asked the question is trying to, like Chrome has an option where if I sign in with my Gmail account and attach it and sync it with my account, then move to another computer and I sign into Chrome there with the same username and password, it gives me the ability to carry all of the saved information over. And again, this is where security-wise, this is all how it's implemented. So is it safe to save things in Chrome? And how is it saved? I personally prefer to, again, keep all of my information in a security password manager that's built from the ground up, for security. And so it's, at that point, is it secure? It's secured through Google's methods. Have there been issues in the past? I think that's where you'd have to take a look at which browser it is and how they're implementing it. Again, there have been known issues where files or how things are stored by different browsers aren't 100% secure, but they're hard to get into. But I think that's kind of a nuanced thing. So yeah, I guess, sorry, that's not a really good answer, but again, password managers, that's something that we would look to do just to make sure and check out that solution, check out the encryption and see how it's implemented for that. All right. Yeah, Brittany, are there any other questions or anything that you guys want to discuss? Okay, so question, given that the many risks of hacking, is there an affordable way to solve this problem? Yeah, so I'm not sure what the person asking the question is referring to with hackings. I think when people kind of talk about hacking, people think about for antiviruses. Okay, so going back to the statistics, I think there's kind of a misconception where a lot of people think that breaches start from either someone trying to get into their system or some machine trying to break into your system. Statistics show heavily that it's not a machine just like trying to attack you. It's things that we come across that our users, our staff do that introduce whether it's viruses or phishing into the environment. And so the best thing that we can do is to either help our users to educate them a little bit of what we talked about today, how to recognize what a phishing email looks like, having policies in place. You can even do simple things like your email system. You can implement banners that say this email is from outside of their organization. Be careful when clicking links. Even simple things like that make a big difference because we know that our users are the biggest areas of entry into our organizations. And so whether it's through phishing, whether it's them clicking on something, the likelihood of that being the source of the problem versus, you know, being on the internet and someone trying to break into my computer, it's much higher that it's the user side that's the user that's going to let someone in to our environment. And so security awareness training, that's a big thing. Educating your users, just, you know, even having a policy of, you know, if you receive a link, never click on it, just type it in or go directly. If, you know, it's something email related, check with someone. So in our organization at our help desk, something that that has been very good, a good sign for us as we've been telling more and more people about this, you know, our help desk is seeing people checking in, they're sending in emails. Hey, is this something that's legitimate? Or, you know, I got this notification, should I be responding to it? So just people being more aware of what they should and shouldn't do. And I would say every time we see one of those, more times than not, it's something that's not legitimate. And so, you know, it's great to see that people are starting to identify these more. That's a good thing. You know, some other things that are highly recommended is making sure your computer systems are updated and patched. That's a big thing. Most Windows systems, Mac systems have the ability, and it'll tell you when your system's out of date or it needs to run an update. And so when that comes up, make sure you go through it and run those updates. And what those updates do is it not only provides more features to the system, but if there are problems that are identified, a lot of these fixes are applied during those patches and updates. Okay, so let's see, another question here. Many small businesses have recently incorporated e-commerce into their business. What are ways they can protect their clients' information? Also, what are the benefits or disadvantages of using PayPal or other similar payment companies? Okay, so this is a good question. When you are doing e-commerce, there's a couple of things that you want to consider. And most times, you know, now there are complete solutions for e-commerce, meaning you sign up for a service, they handle everything for you, whether it's, you know, publishing your products and catalogs, to collecting your payment, to managing your customer information. That's all self-contained. And so when you can find a service like that and they have the systems in place as a small business owner, that's what I would recommend. Because if you start bringing those pieces in-house, so for example, let's say you run a website, but every time they buy something, the order is sent to a system that you own and manage on premise. So, you know, the data is actually in your hands, in your office, you're processing those payments using that information in-house, then that responsibility to manage the data in those systems now are back to you because you're running those systems internally. So a lot of times when you're running, having an outside service do all of that, so, you know, any of the e-commerce platforms, then they're taking care of the data, the payment processing, and it's all self-contained. So I would highly recommend, if you're, you know, a smaller organization that doesn't have any need to be running your own web servers and e-commerce platform on your own, going through a service like that really helps because they are handling a lot of those technical details on the back end. So another question here is, the usage of smart home devices, what extra precautions do I need to have set up to protect my family, Ring, Nest Cam, etc.? Okay, so that is a, so one of the, whatever device it is, as long as it's connected to the internet, there's the possibility of it either calling out or someone getting into it, right? So a lot of times what you can do with a lot of these systems is to make sure that we talked about patching, staying on top of these events. You know, it's not common to see a security camera vendor put something out and find that. Hi, I'm getting a note here that I'm breaking up. Are you okay now? Hi there. I'm gonna just continue. If you could just let me know if I'm still breaking up. Okay, so sorry about that little internet technical difficulties here. So the question was about securing any kind of device you're plugging into your network. And so if you're a home user, it's a little bit harder. There are ways, if you're in a different kind of environment, to segregate your network, which just means you keep these kind of outside devices like your Ring or your DVR or those types of systems. You keep all of those devices outside and separate from what's inside. So my computers, my printer, my server, to have that separation of devices. But some practical things you can do from your home is make sure, again, we talked about patching a little bit, to make sure those devices are patched and maintained. The password policies, those are there. You've probably heard of issues like some of those camera services where people are logging in and viewing your accounts and your cameras online. And that's definitely very scary. In terms of protection, if you're doing what you can and it's just a flaw in the system itself, whether someone can access their systems and view users' cameras, there's not much you as a user can do other than patch and update the systems that you have in place. So, unfortunately, sometimes, and this is, me personally, this is what I do for devices like that, surveillance cameras, we definitely use them in places where I'd have not as much problems if someone saw them. So entryways, outdoor areas, that kind of thing, as opposed to, in private spaces or even your living room and that kind of thing. And so that's just kind of just a rule of thumb. What can you do actually is, again, that's where vetting the vendors and what they can do makes a big difference. Okay, so video conferencing, what are some video conferencing platforms? And so with remote work and what we've been going through, Zoom has kind of just popped up as a front runner. There are different platforms out there. People still use services like GoToMeeting, WebEx and Microsoft Teams, you've probably heard about. And so some of the big things that they rely on it's the main thing is your internet connection, and having a reliable internet connection, and then your audio and video hardware. So between those and then choosing your different platforms, all of them do very similar functions. At that point, you can look at how they implement their security, how they keep people out of meetings, how easy is it for you to invite people that you want to attend your meetings, how easy is it for guests to get on and join. And so, those are all things to look at. Some of the services are not as encrypted as others. So I know we use Microsoft Teams, and Teams by design, the communication is encrypted there. So that's something that we use internally because we're a Microsoft Office 365 user and provider. Yeah, and so question asked here is, what are some of the advantages in working with an IT company, and when would you want to work with an IT company? And so there are definitely advantages. We work with all types of companies, all different sizes and complexities. And I would say that when you're at the point where you no longer feel comfortable implementing or running your own IT, then that's where we can definitely help, or companies like us can help. So some of the advantages are, just expertise. We do this day in and day out. We know the different products, how well they work, what are good tools for certain types of problems. What are the best communication tools? How should I store my data? I have 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 users. What are some tools that I can use to increase my efficiency, communication? And so I think that's where having a company or a provider that just that's all they do, it really saves a lot of time. Whereas you could do it on your own and spend the time researching and maybe implementing it for the first time to try to make it work best. I think that's where bringing in an organization or someone that's doing it regularly adds a lot of value. And so there's another question here is, there have been an increase in organizations with a blended workforce, on-site and remote. How do you protect your company's data from being breached when you're sending files via email or storing documents in a cloud? So with that, a blended workforce, I really believe more organizations are going to be doing this, working remotely. Some people staggering shifts going into the office, some not going into the office at all. And so when you do that, you need to have a secure system in place that can accomplish those things, so that people can access their data anywhere, that while things are being sent and stored, that it's secured and encrypted, and permissions are only to the people who have access to it. How, questions come up, how do I securely share this with a client or a vendor? And so there are different tools. So we are a Microsoft partner. Microsoft 365 is something that you may or may not have heard of. And Microsoft has released this cloud-based platform. It's just a collection of tools to do email, Teams communication, storage of files, sharing these files with clients, vendors, anyone outside of my organization. You can collaborate on them. So if I'm working on a spreadsheet or a document or a presentation, I can have someone join me in real time, and we can be making changes together at the same time. And so that would be something that I could recommend if you're just getting started. Look for tools like that. Google has in their G Suite, they have something similar. Dropbox is a file sharing tool that you can do. It talked about sharing files, how can you do that securely and sync? So that's one of the tools. So, implementing what tool works best for you and making sure how you use it, how your users are saving their files. We talked about encryption of local hardware. So as people move out, encryption of their local devices is a must. So, whether you leave it someplace or it gets taken, from your car, or you just don't know what happened to it, the encryption gives you that option to say whatever was on that laptop or computer, hard drive, phone, whatever it is, the data on there is not readable by anyone. All right, so I think we're up on our time. If I could just, Brittany, can I get you back on? And
all right, thank you so much, Stan, and thank you for everyone for joining us today. Again, cybersecurity is such an important topic, I think, for small businesses right now, as more and more small businesses are transitioning to their business to being online. And I know that especially to now that a lot of customers, they're actually asking for that, where they are talking about, can I pay via PayPal or Apple Pay or whatnot? So definitely, an important topic to make sure that your business is secure, as well as safe, as, not just for your business, but also too for your clients. But I really want to thank Stan and Belinda Lau for helping us with facilitating today's workshop. If you have any questions, we will be forwarding an email later on today with their with more information about how you can get in contact with them if you have any questions for your small business. And also, please join us for our upcoming webinar on necessary technology for managing a blended workforce. We will be having Microsoft helping us to lead that on helping our small business community to learn about one of the platforms that you can use to help with your collaboration amongst your team. And so that is on June 30th at 10 a.m. Please be sure to check out our website on how to sign up, and also too for more information about our upcoming webinar series in July. In July, we are actually going to be starting a legal webinar series with the Business Law Corps that will be on topics on how small businesses have been affected by COVID-19 and their impact on their leases, as well as on their employees, and also much more. But thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next week.